Dying man in the desert, an Apache warrior torn between history and honor, and a promise so powerful it will change two families forever. But what truly happened in that canyon? And why did the elder offer something no man would ever expect? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the rugged terrain of the Apache territory in the year 1876. The land stretched endlessly, painted in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson, with scattered mesquite trees providing sparse shade across the desert floor. In the distance, the Superstition Mountains rose majestically against the cloudless sky, their peaks sharp and unforgiving like the teeth of some ancient beast. This was a land where only the strong survived, where every drop of water was precious, and where the Apache people had made their home for generations uncounted. Naiche, a young Apache warrior of 25 summers, rode his paint horse through a narrow canyon, his dark eyes constantly scanning the rocky walls above for any sign of danger. His bronzed skin glistened with sweat beneath the relentless sun, and his long black hair was tied back with a strip of leather, keeping it away from his angular face. He was tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders and strong arms that had been honed by years of hunting, fighting, and surviving in this harsh landscape. His muscular frame moved with the natural grace of a predator, every movement economical and purposeful. Around his waist he wore traditional Apache clothing, and a knife hung at his side, its bone handle worn smooth from constant use. He had been tracking a small herd of mule deer for 2 days, following their trail through the canyon systems that crisscrossed this region. His village needed the meat desperately, as the summer had been particularly brutal and game had become scarce. The responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders, for he was one of the best hunters in his band, and many families were counting on his success. As Naiche guided his horse around a bend in the canyon, he suddenly pulled back sharply on the reins. His mount stopped instantly, trained to respond to the slightest command. There, ahead on the canyon floor, he saw something that made his warrior instincts flare to life. 3 men lay scattered across the ground, and even from this distance he could see the dark stains of blood on the sand around them. 2 horses stood nervously nearby, their reins trailing in the dust. Naiche dismounted silently, his hand moving instinctively to his knife. He approached cautiously, his moccasins making no sound on the rocky ground. As he drew closer, he could see that 2 of the men were clearly dead, their bodies twisted at unnatural angles, their clothes torn and bloodied. But the 3rd man, an older white settler with silver hair and a weathered face, was still breathing, though barely. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored movements. The old man's eyes fluttered open as Naiche knelt beside him. There was fear there at first, the natural terror of a white man finding himself at the mercy of an Apache warrior. But then something else replaced it, something desperate and pleading. Blood seeped from a deep wound in his side, and another gash across his shoulder had soaked his shirt crimson. "Please," the old man whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind that whispered through the canyon. "Please, help me. Bandits. They attacked us, took everything, left me to die." Naiche studied the man's face carefully. He had every reason to leave this settler to his fate. His people and the white settlers had been at odds for years, with broken treaties and bloodshed on both sides, creating a gulf of mistrust and hatred. Many of his own relatives had died at the hands of white men. Yet something in the old man's eyes gave him pause. There was no hatred there, no contempt, only the universal fear of death and a desperate hope for mercy. The warrior's mind raced through his options. He could ride away and let nature take its course. No one would blame him. No one would even know. But deep within his chest something stirred, a part of him that his grandmother had always nurtured when he was a boy. She had taught him that true strength was not just in the ability to take life, but in the wisdom to know when to preserve it. "I will help you, old man," Naiche said in surprisingly clear English, learned from traders and missionaries who had passed through Apache lands over the years. "But we must move quickly. You have lost much blood." The old man's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you. My name is Thomas. Thomas Hartwell. I have a ranch, 3 days' ride from here, near Tucson. My daughter, she's there alone. If I don't return. Nietzsche held up a hand, silencing him. Save your strength, we will talk later. He moved swiftly, tearing strips from one of the dead men's shirts to create bandages. With practiced efficiency, he packed the worst of Thomas's wounds with moss and herbs he carried in a pouch at his waist, then wrapped them tightly. The old man groaned in pain, but did not cry out. Can you ride? Nietzsche asked, already knowing the answer would be no. The old man's left leg was badly injured, possibly broken. Thomas shook his head weakly. I don't think so. The pain. It's too much. Nietzsche looked at the horses nearby. One of them, a sturdy bay gelding, seemed calm enough despite the carnage around it. He made a decision that he knew would complicate his life considerably. He fashioned a travois from branches and rope he found among the scattered supplies, attaching it to the bay horse. Carefully, with surprising gentleness for such a powerful man, he lifted Thomas onto the travois, securing him with more rope to prevent him from sliding off during the journey. Where do you take me? Thomas asked through gritted teeth as Nietzsche prepared to mount his own horse. To my village, Nietzsche replied. It is half a day's ride from here. Our medicine woman can treat your wounds better than I can. After you are stronger, we will decide what to do next. As they began the long journey back, Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness. During his lucid moments, he would speak, his words tumbling out in a fevered rush as if he feared he might die before he could say everything he needed to say. My daughter, Sarah, he murmured at one point. She's beautiful, strong like her mother was. Her mother died 5 years ago. Fever took her. Sarah's been running the ranch with me since then. She's only 22, but she's got the strength of 10 men. Smart, too. Can read and write, keep accounts, handle a rifle better than most men I know. Nietzsche listened but did not respond. His attention focused on navigating the treacherous terrain, while keeping a watchful eye out for any threats. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Why did you help me? Thomas asked suddenly, his voice stronger for a moment. You're Apache. Our people haven't exactly been friendly to each other. Nietzsche was silent for a long moment, considering his answer. Finally he spoke, his deep voice carrying clearly in the desert air. My grandmother taught me that every life has value, that the measure of a man is not in how many enemies he can kill, but in the choices he makes when no one is watching. You were defenseless, dying. To leave you would have been the act of a coward, not a warrior. Thomas absorbed these words and something shifted in his eyes. You're not what I expected, he said softly. The stories people tell about the Apache, they paint you all as savages, monsters, but you're just a man, trying to live by your own code of honor. And you are not what I expected of white settlers, Nietzsche replied. Many of your people see us as less than human, as obstacles to be removed, yet you speak to me with respect, despite your fear. As the sun finally set, they arrived at Nietzsche's village, a collection of traditional wickiups nestled in a protected valley. The arrival of the young warrior with an injured white man caused immediate commotion. Warriors rushed forward, hands on their weapons, while women pulled children behind them protectively. Nietzsche raised his hand, calling out in Apache, explaining the situation to his people. There was heated debate, voices raised in anger and concern. Many wanted to send the white man away or worse, but Nietzsche stood firm, his reputation as a fierce warrior and skilled hunter carrying weight with his people. Finally, the medicine woman, an elderly Apache named Desba, stepped forward. She examined Thomas with practiced eyes, then nodded curtly. Bring him to my wickiup, she commanded. If he is under our protection, then I will treat him. But you, Nietzsche, take responsibility for this decision. His fate is tied to yours now. I understand, Nietzsche replied solemnly. I accept this responsibility. As they carried Thomas into Desba's dwelling, the old man grasped Nietzsche's arm with surprising strength. You saved my life today, he whispered. I don't know how I can ever repay such a debt, but I swear to you, Apache warrior, I will find a way. Thomas Hartwell always pays his debts. Nietzsche met his eyes and saw genuine sincerity there, along with something else he couldn't quite identify. It would be weeks before he understood the full weight of those words and how they would change his life forever. The medicine woman worked through the night, cleaning Thomas's wounds and applying poultices made from desert plants. Naiche remained nearby, watching over his charge despite the disapproving looks from some of his fellow warriors. As dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Thomas's fever finally broke, and he fell into a deep, healing sleep. 3 weeks had passed since Naiche brought Thomas Hartwell to the Apache village, and the old rancher's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. Under Desba's expert care and the healing properties of traditional Apache medicine, Thomas's wounds had closed cleanly, and his strength had returned day by day. During his convalescence, he had learned much about the Apache people, their customs, their struggles, and their deep connection to this unforgiving land. And Naiche had learned about Thomas, about his ranch near Tucson, about his late wife Margaret, and most of all, about his daughter Sarah. The two men had formed an unlikely friendship, bound together by the life debt that existed between them. They would sit outside Desba's wickiup in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, and talk for hours. Thomas spoke of his years in Arizona, of building his ranch from nothing, of the challenges of raising a daughter alone after Margaret's death. Naiche spoke of his own losses, of family members killed in conflicts with settlers and soldiers, of the slow erosion of Apache lands and the traditional way of life. "I need to get back to my ranch," Thomas said one evening, his voice tinged with worry. "Sarah must be beside herself. She'll think I'm dead. And the ranch can't run itself, even with the hands we employ. She needs help, especially with the fall roundup coming." Naiche nodded thoughtfully. "You are strong enough to travel now. Tomorrow, I will take you home." "It is 3 days' ride, you said?" "Yes, but Naiche, I can't ask you to leave your people for that long. You've already done so much for me." The warrior shook his head firmly. "You are still not fully healed. The journey will be difficult. I will see you safely to your home. This is not a request or a favor. It is what must be done." Thomas looked at the young Apache warrior, at his proud bearing and unwavering determination, and felt a strange mixture of gratitude and something else, an idea that had been forming in his mind over the past few weeks. But he said nothing yet, waiting for the right moment. The next morning, they departed at dawn. Naiche had secured 2 horses and provisions for the journey. Several of his fellow warriors had questioned his decision to escort the white man all the way to his ranch, warning him of potential dangers from both white settlers and the U.S. cavalry that patrolled the region. But Naiche's mind was made up, and his status as a respected warrior meant his choices were his own to make. They traveled steadily, avoiding main trails and settlements, moving through the vast Arizona territory with the caution of men who understood that danger could come from any direction. Thomas marveled at Naiche's knowledge of the land, his ability to find water where there seemed to be none, to read signs in the earth that told stories of who or what had passed by and when. On the second night, as they camped in a sheltered canyon, Thomas finally spoke the words that had been weighing on his mind. "Naiche, I've been thinking about how to repay the debt I owe you. Saving my life, that's not something that can be settled with money or goods. It requires something more significant." Naiche looked up from the small fire he was tending. "You owe me nothing, Thomas. I did what any honorable man would do." "But that's where you're wrong," Thomas insisted, his weathered face serious in the firelight. "Not any man would have done what you did. Most would have ridden past, especially given the history between our peoples. You risked yourself, brought me to your village despite opposition from your own people, and now you're taking days away from your life to see me home safely. That deserves recognition, and more than that, it deserves proper compensation." "I do not want payment," Naiche said quietly. "Your friendship is enough." Thomas was silent for a moment, staring into the flames. "What if I told you there was a way you could help me, help my daughter, and in doing so, receive something of real value in return? Would you hear me out?" Naiche studied the old man's face, seeing the sincerity there. "I will listen. My ranch is substantial. Over 2,000 acres of good grazing land with water rights to a year-round creek. I've built it up over 20 years, and it's worth a considerable sum. But I'm getting old, Naiche. These injuries have reminded me that I'm not immortal. What happens to the ranch when I'm gone? What happens to Sarah? She would inherit it, would she not? That is the white man's law. Yes, she would. But a woman alone, running a ranch that size, it's not easy. She'd be a target for every unscrupulous man looking to marry into wealth. Or worse, for those who might try to force her off the land through intimidation or violence. I've worried about this for years. And now, after meeting you, after seeing the kind of man you are, I think I've found an answer. Nietzsche waited, sensing that whatever Thomas was about to propose would be significant. Thomas took a deep breath. I want you to marry my daughter, Sarah. I want you to become my son-in-law, my heir. You would inherit the ranch when I die, and more importantly, you would protect Sarah, provide for her, give her the kind of partner she deserves. Someone strong, honorable, capable. Someone like you. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from the fire. Nietzsche stared at Thomas, trying to process what he had just heard. Marry Sarah? A white woman he had never met? Become a rancher? The idea was so foreign, so unexpected, that he struggled to find words. Thomas, this is not a simple thing you propose. Your daughter, she would never agree to this. She does not know me. And your people, they would never accept an Apache as the owner of a successful ranch. The prejudice runs too deep. Sarah is not like other white women, Thomas said firmly. She's been raised to think for herself, to judge people by their character, not the color of their skin. Her mother was the same way. As for what other people think, I don't give a damn. It's my ranch, my daughter, and my decision. I've seen enough in my life to know that true worth isn't determined by race or background, but by the content of a man's character. And you, Nietzsche, you have more character in your little finger than most white men have in their entire bodies. But your daughter, she should have a choice in this matter. Arranged marriages, they are not always happy ones. Thomas nodded. You're right, and I wouldn't force this on her. But I know my Sarah. When I tell her what you did for me, when she meets you and sees the kind of man you are, I believe she'll understand. And if she doesn't agree, then we'll find another way to repay the debt I owe you. But at least give it a chance. Come to the ranch, meet her, stay for a while. Let her get to know you as I have. What do you have to lose? Nietzsche considered this carefully. His life in the Apache village was becoming increasingly difficult. The traditional ways were dying, as more white settlers encroached on their lands, as the U.S. government forced them onto smaller and smaller territories. Game was scarce, conflicts were frequent, and the future looked bleak. Perhaps this was an opportunity not just for himself, but potentially for his people. If he could build a bridge between the Apache and at least some of the white settlers, maybe it could lead to better understanding, less bloodshed. I will come to your ranch, Nietzsche said finally. I will meet your daughter, but I make no promises beyond that. If she does not wish this arrangement, I will respect her decision and leave in peace. Thomas's face broke into a relieved smile. That's all I ask. Thank you, Nietzsche. You won't regret this, I promise you. They reached the Hartwell Ranch late on the third day of travel. It was larger and more impressive than Nietzsche had imagined, with a sturdy main house built of adobe and timber, several outbuildings, extensive corrals, and hundreds of cattle grazing across the rolling grassland. The setting sun cast everything in golden light, making the ranch look almost magical. As they rode up the main path toward the house, the front door burst open and a young woman rushed out. Even from a distance, Nietzsche could see that she was beautiful, with long, honey-colored hair that caught the light, and a slender but strong figure clothed in practical ranch wear, a simple dress covered by a leather vest and boots. This had to be Sarah. "Papa!" she cried out, running toward them with tears streaming down her face. "Oh God, Papa, I thought you were dead. It's been almost a month." Thomas dismounted with some difficulty, his injuries still causing him pain, and embraced his daughter tightly. "I'm all right, sweetheart. I'm all right. I had some trouble, but this man, this Apache warrior named Nietzsche, he saved my life." Sarah pulled back from her father, her eyes red from crying, and for the first time she really looked at Nietzsche. He sat tall on his horse, his powerful frame silhouetted against the darkening sky, and their eyes met. Nietzsche found himself staring into the most striking blue eyes he had ever seen, eyes that held intelligence, strength, and a depth of emotion that took his breath away. She was not just beautiful. She was radiant, with high cheekbones, full lips, and sun-kissed skin that spoke of hours spent working outdoors. For her part, Sarah found herself unable to look away from the Apache warrior. She had expected to feel fear, or at least apprehension, but instead, she felt something entirely different. There was a nobility in his bearing, a quiet strength in his dark eyes that spoke of integrity and courage. He was handsome in a way that made her heart beat faster, with his strong jawline, prominent cheekbones, and the way his long black hair framed his face. His muscular arms and broad shoulders suggested power, but his eyes held gentleness. "Thank you," Sarah said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for saving my father's life. I don't know how to express my gratitude." Naiche dismounted, moving with the fluid grace that characterized all his movements. "Your father is a good man. I did only what was right." Thomas looked between his daughter and the Apache warrior, seeing something in their faces that gave him hope. The connection was immediate, undeniable, like lightning striking from a clear sky. He had hoped they might grow to care for each other over time, but this instant attraction was more than he had dared dream. The days that followed Naiche's arrival at the Hartwell Ranch were unlike anything he had ever experienced. Thomas had insisted that the Apache warrior stay in the main house, in one of the spare bedrooms, despite the shocked protests of some of the ranch hands. Sarah had supported her father's decision without hesitation, and her authority as the ranch manager carried weight with the workers, even if some of them grumbled about it in private. Naiche found himself in a strange new world, one of wooden floors and glass windows, of beds with mattresses and meals eaten at a table with metal utensils. But what truly captivated him was Sarah. Every interaction with her revealed new layers to her character, and he found himself drawn to her in ways he had never imagined possible. Sarah was up before dawn each morning, working alongside the ranch hands to feed the animals, repair fences, and manage the daily operations of the ranch. Naiche watched her in admiration, seeing how she commanded respect not through fear or force, but through her competence and fairness. She knew every aspect of ranch life, could ride as well as any man, and wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty with the hard work that needed doing. On the third day of his stay, Naiche joined her as she checked on a herd of cattle in the eastern pasture. They rode side by side, the morning sun warming their backs, and for a while neither spoke, content in the comfortable silence that had developed between them. "My father told me what he proposed to you," Sarah said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but Naiche could detect a slight tremor of nervousness beneath the words. "About us marrying. About you inheriting the ranch." Naiche tensed, unsure how to respond. "He did. I hope you understand that I made no demands of him. This was entirely his idea." Sarah turned to look at him, her blue eyes studying his face carefully. "I know. That's not the kind of man you are. Papa told me everything about how you found him, how you risked yourself to save him, how you brought him to your village and cared for him. He said you could have left him to die, that no one would have blamed you, but you chose mercy instead. It was the right thing to do." "Maybe," Sarah said thoughtfully, "but most people don't do the right thing when it's difficult or dangerous. That takes real courage, real integrity. Those are rare qualities, Naiche, regardless of whether someone is Apache or white or anything else." They dismounted near a grove of cottonwood trees that provided shade from the climbing sun. Sarah pulled a canteen from her saddle and took a long drink before offering it to Naiche. Their fingers touched briefly as he accepted it, and both felt a jolt of electricity at the contact. "What do you think about my father's proposal?" Naiche asked, deciding that directness was better than dancing around the subject. "Do you object to it?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out across the ranch land that stretched to the horizon. "A month ago, if someone had told me I would be considering marrying an Apache warrior, I would have thought they were insane. But that was before I met you, before I saw how you look at the world, how you carry yourself, how you treat people with respect and dignity. You're nothing like what I expected, Naiche." "What did you expect?" "Honestly, I expected someone savage, uncivilized, dangerous. That's what we're taught about the Apache, about all the native peoples. But you're educated, thoughtful, kind. You speak English as well as I do. You have your own code of honor that seems stronger than what most white men live by. And you're—" She trailed off, a blush coloring her cheeks. "I am what?" Nietzsche prompted gently. Sarah met his eyes directly, her gaze unflinching despite her embarrassment. "You're the most handsome man I've ever seen." "There, I said it. I know I shouldn't be so forward, but I'm tired of playing games and pretending. From the moment I saw you, I felt something I've never felt before. It scared me and excited me at the same time." Nietzsche felt his own heart racing at her words. "I felt it too," he admitted. "When our eyes met that first evening, it was like the ground shifted beneath my feet. You are beautiful, Sarah. But more than that, you are strong and capable and intelligent. In my culture, these are the qualities we value most in a woman. You would be respected among my people." "But could you respect me?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could you truly care for me? Or would I always just be an obligation? A debt your honor demanded you fulfill?" Nietzsche moved closer to her, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her blue eyes, close enough to smell the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "You are no obligation, Sarah Hartwell. In these few days you have captured my attention, my admiration, and if I am honest, my heart. I came here expecting to fulfill a duty to your father, but I find myself staying for an entirely different reason. I stay because I cannot imagine leaving you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "It's crazy, it's too fast, and it will cause problems we can't even imagine yet. But I don't care. I want this. I want you." Nietzsche covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face. "Then we will face those problems together. Your father offered me a place here, a new life. But I would give up the ranch, the inheritance, everything, just for the chance to be with you. You are worth more than any land or cattle or wealth. You don't have to give up anything," Sarah said firmly. "This ranch needs someone like you. Papa is getting older and I can't run it alone forever. With you beside me, we could make this place into something even greater than it is now. We could show people that Apache and white settlers can live and work together, that cooperation is better than conflict." Their faces were inches apart now, and Nietzsche could feel the warmth of her breath on his skin. "There will be those who oppose us," he warned, "both among my people and yours. Some will see our union as a betrayal." "Let them think what they want," Sarah replied with fierce determination. "I'm done living my life based on other people's prejudices and fears. My mother taught me to follow my heart, and my heart is telling me that you are the man I'm meant to be with. Is your heart telling you anything?" "It is telling me," Nietzsche said slowly, his dark eyes locked on hers, "that I have found something precious and rare, something worth fighting for. It is telling me that you are my destiny, Sarah, and that I will protect you and cherish you for all my days." Unable to resist any longer, Sarah closed the distance between them and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as years of loneliness and longing found expression in that single moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, their hearts pounding in unison. "Marry me," Nietzsche said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not because your father wishes it, not because of any debt or obligation, but because I love you, Sarah Hartwell. I love your strength, your courage, your compassion. I love the way you look at the world, and the way you make me feel when I am near you. Marry me and let us build a life together." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you, Nietzsche. I love you too. I know it seems impossible that I could feel this way so quickly, but I do. I love you with everything I am." They held each other for a long time under the cottonwood trees, two souls from different worlds who had found in each other something that transcended culture, race, and history. Eventually, they rode back to the ranch house together, their horses walking side by side, their hands occasionally reaching out to touch, to confirm that this was real, that they had truly found each other. Thomas was waiting on the porch when they returned, and one look at their faces told him everything he needed to know. His weathered features broke into a wide smile, and he stood to greet them as they dismounted. "Papa," Sarah said, running to embrace her father. "We've decided. Naiche has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes. We want your blessing." Thomas hugged his daughter tightly, then extended his hand to Naiche. When the Apache warrior took it, Thomas pulled him into an embrace as well. "You have my blessing, both of you. More than that, you have my gratitude and my joy. I knew from the moment I saw you two together that this was meant to be. Naiche, you saved my life, and now you're giving me the greatest gift an old man could ask for, the knowledge that my daughter will be loved and protected by a man of true worth. I will honor her always," Naiche promised solemnly. "She will never regret her choice to be with me. This I swear on everything I hold sacred. I know you will, son. I know you will." Thomas's eyes were bright with tears. "Now we should start making preparations. I want this wedding to happen soon, before anyone can try to interfere or cause trouble." Over the next 2 weeks, preparations for the wedding moved forward rapidly. Thomas sent word to the local minister, a progressive-minded man named Reverend Matthews, who had long advocated for fair treatment of the Apache people. When Matthews heard the story of how Naiche had saved Thomas's life and how the young couple had fallen in love, he agreed enthusiastically to perform the ceremony. But not everyone was happy about the upcoming union. Some of the ranch hands quit in protest, unwilling to work for an Apache owner. Several neighboring ranchers sent angry letters to Thomas, accusing him of betraying his own race and threatening to ostracize the Hartwell Ranch from the local Cattlemen's Association. The threats and opposition only strengthened Sarah and Naiche's resolve to move forward with their wedding. They had found something rare and precious in each other, and they refused to let prejudice and hatred destroy it. Thomas stood firmly behind them, making it clear to anyone who questioned his decision that Naiche had earned his respect and his daughter's hand through actions, not words, and that anyone who couldn't accept that was no friend of the Hartwell family. 3 days before the wedding, trouble arrived in the form of Clayton Briggs, a wealthy rancher from a neighboring property who had been pursuing Sarah's hand in marriage for over a year. She had rejected him repeatedly, finding him arrogant and cruel, but he had never accepted her refusals. Now, hearing about her engagement to an Apache warrior, he came to the Hartwell Ranch with 6 armed men, his face twisted with rage and indignation. Naiche was working in the east pasture when one of the loyal ranch hands, an older cowboy named Pete who had come to respect the Apache warrior, came riding hard with the warning, "Briggs is at the main house with his men," Pete shouted as he pulled his horse to a stop. "He's making threats, demanding to see Miss Sarah. Thomas is trying to keep things calm, but it's getting heated. You better get back there quick." Without a word, Naiche wheeled his horse around and raced toward the ranch house, his heart pounding with fear not for himself, but for Sarah and Thomas. He arrived to find Briggs and his men on the porch, facing off against Thomas, who stood with his rifle in his hands, his face set in grim determination. Sarah was behind her father, her own rifle trained on Briggs, her blue eyes blazing with fury. "This is your last chance, old man," Briggs was saying, his voice dripping with contempt. "Call off this insane wedding and let Sarah marry a proper white man, someone who can actually help this ranch prosper. I'm willing to overlook this lapse in judgment and still take her as my wife, but my patience has limits. Get off my property, Briggs," Thomas growled. "Sarah's made her choice, and it's not you. It will never be you. Now leave before someone gets hurt." Briggs laughed harshly. "You think you can threaten me? I've got 6 men with me, and all you've got is an old man's pride and a savage who thinks he can play at being civilized. This is my final offer. Give me Sarah, or I'll take her, and I'll burn this ranch to the ground." "You'll do no such thing." Naiche's voice rang out clear and strong as he dismounted and walked toward the porch. His hand rested on the knife at his belt, and his dark eyes were cold as winter stone. "Sarah Hartwell is my intended wife. She has made her choice freely, and that choice is me. You will respect her decision, or you will answer to me." Briggs turned to face Naiche, his lip curling in disgust. "So the savage shows himself. You really think you can have her? You think white society will ever accept an Apache running a successful ranch, married to a white woman? You're deluding yourself. And more than that, you're putting everyone on this ranch in danger. There are men in this territory who would kill you just for being Apache, let alone for having the audacity to marry a white woman. Then let them come, Nietzsche replied calmly. I have faced death many times. I do not fear it. But I will not let fear dictate how I live my life or who I love. Sarah is my heart, and I am hers. That is all that matters. One of Briggs's men, a rough-looking character with a scarred face, spat tobacco juice on the ground. Maybe we should just shoot him now, boss. Do everyone a favor. One less Apache to worry about. The tension on the porch escalated instantly. Thomas and Sarah both raised their rifles, and Nietzsche's hand tightened on his knife. Briggs's other men reached for their weapons, and for a moment it seemed certain that violence would erupt. But then another voice called out from behind Briggs and his men. I wouldn't do that if I were you, gentlemen. Not unless you want to explain to the territorial marshal why you started a gunfight on Thomas Hartwell's property. Everyone turned to see Reverend Matthews approaching on horseback, accompanied by 3 other men. One of them wore a marshal's badge, and the other 2 were prominent businessmen from Tucson, whom Thomas had dealt with for years. They had come early for the wedding and had arrived just in time to witness the confrontation. Marshal Dixon dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his pistol. Clayton Briggs, I've had complaints about you and your men causing trouble in the territory for months now. Seems like every time there's a problem, your name comes up. Now, Mr. Hartwell here is a respected member of this community, and if he wants to give his daughter's hand to this Apache warrior, that's his business and hers, nobody else's. So I suggest you and your boys mount up and ride out of here before I find a reason to arrest the lot of you. Briggs's face turned purple with rage, but he wasn't stupid enough to challenge a territorial marshal. This isn't over, he snarled. You can't change what you are, savage. And you, he turned to Sarah. You'll regret this choice. When you're living in a wiki up eating roots and berries, don't come crying to me. The only thing I would regret, Sarah said coldly, her voice steady despite her anger, is wasting one more second of my life listening to your ignorant threats. Nietzsche is twice the man you could ever hope to be. Now get off our land before I shoot you myself for trespassing. Briggs and his men mounted their horses and rode away, but not before Briggs threw one last venomous look at Nietzsche. Watch your back, Apache. Accidents happen out here in the territory. Would be a shame if something happened to you before the wedding. After they had gone, Marshal Dixon approached Nietzsche and extended his hand. Name's Robert Dixon. I've heard about what you did for Thomas, saving his life out in that canyon. That took real courage. And from what I can see, you've won Sarah's heart fair and square. You have my support for what it's worth. Not everyone in the territory is as narrow-minded as Briggs. Nietzsche shook the marshal's hand gratefully. Thank you, Marshal. Your support means much. Over the next 2 days, more people arrived for the wedding. Some out of genuine happiness for the couple, others out of curiosity to see this unprecedented union between an Apache warrior and a rancher's daughter. Nietzsche had sent word to his village, and to his surprise and joy, several members of his band arrived, including his grandmother Desba and 3 of his closest warrior friends. They had come to witness this new chapter in his life, and to show their support despite their own reservations about him joining the white man's world. The wedding took place on a brilliant Sunday morning in late September, with the Arizona sun shining down on the Hartwell Ranch like a blessing. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, a beautiful ivory gown that Thomas had kept preserved all these years. She looked radiant, her honey-colored hair adorned with wildflowers, her blue eyes shining with joy and love as she walked toward Nietzsche on her father's arm. Nietzsche stood waiting in traditional Apache ceremonial clothing that his grandmother had brought, the leather decorated with intricate beadwork and symbols that told the story of his lineage and accomplishments. He had never looked more handsome or more proud, his dark eyes fixed on Sarah as she approached, his heart so full of love that he thought it might burst. Reverend Matthews conducted the ceremony with warmth and dignity, incorporating elements from both Apache and Christian traditions. When he asked if anyone objected to the union, there was a tense moment of silence, but no one spoke. Finally, he pronounced them husband and wife, and when Nietzsche kissed Sarah, sealing their vows, a cheer went up from the assembled guests that echoed across the ranch land. Thomas stood to the side, tears streaming down his weathered face, watching his daughter begin her new life with the man who had saved him and won his daughter's heart. He felt Margaret's presence beside him, as if she were there sharing in this moment of joy, and he knew in his heart that she would have approved. Naiche was everything he could have hoped for in a son-in-law: strong, honorable, capable, and deeply in love with Sarah. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the territory had ever seen. Apache and white settlers sat together, sharing food and stories, finding common ground in their humanity despite their different backgrounds. Children played together without regard to race, and for those few precious hours, the barriers of prejudice and hatred seemed to dissolve in the face of genuine joy and fellowship. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Naiche and Sarah stood together on the porch of the main house, watching their guests celebrate. His arm was around her waist, and her head rested on his shoulder, both of them marveling at the miracle of having found each other. "Are you happy?" Naiche asked softly, his lips close to her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah replied, turning to look up at him. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A true partner, an equal, someone who sees me for who I really am and loves me anyway. I know we'll face challenges, that there will be people who try to tear us apart or make our lives difficult. But I'm not afraid, Naiche. Not as long as we're together. We will face those challenges as we face everything else," Naiche said firmly. "Together as one. Your strength is my strength, and my strength is yours. This ranch will prosper under our care, and perhaps in time, we will have children who will inherit not just land and cattle, but the legacy of two peoples learning to live in harmony." Thomas approached them then, carrying 3 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to each of them and raised his own in a toast. "To my daughter and my son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life, Naiche, and in return I gave you my daughter as a wife. But what started as a debt has become something far greater. You two have shown us all that love transcends the boundaries we create, that understanding can triumph over hatred, and that courage comes in many forms. May your marriage be blessed with happiness, prosperity, and many years together. And may the example you set today ripple outward, changing hearts and minds throughout this territory." They drank together, and as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Naiche felt a peace settle over him that he had never known before. He had found his place in the world, not in the Apache village where he was born, and not fully in the white man's world either, but in a new space that he and Sarah were creating together, a space where two cultures could meet and merge, where love could flourish despite every obstacle thrown in its path. In the weeks and months that followed, the Hartwell Ranch, now officially the Hartwell-Naiche Ranch, became a symbol of hope and possibility in the Arizona territory. Naiche proved to be an exceptional rancher, bringing Apache knowledge of the land and water conservation techniques that increased the ranch's productivity. Sarah worked beside him every day, their partnership evident in everything they did. Thomas lived to see his grandchildren born, 3 beautiful babies who carried the heritage of both their parents' peoples, and he died peacefully in his sleep 5 years after the wedding, content in the knowledge that his daughter was loved, protected, and happy. The challenges they had anticipated did come. There were more threats, more attempts by men like Briggs to cause trouble. But each time, Naiche and Sarah faced them together, their bond growing stronger with each trial they overcame. Marshall Dixon remained a staunch ally, and gradually, other ranchers and settlers began to see that cooperation with the Apache was possible, and even beneficial. Naiche became a bridge between his people and the white settlers, helping to negotiate peaceful solutions to conflicts, and advocating for fair treatment of the Apache bands that still lived in the territory. As the sun set on their wedding day, casting long shadows across the ranch that had become their shared home, Naiche pulled Sarah close and whispered, "Thank you for taking a chance on an Apache warrior who stumbled into your life with your wounded father. You have given me a gift beyond measure." Sarah smiled up at him, her eyes sparkling with tears of joy. "No, my love. Thank you for being the kind of man who would save a stranger's life, who would risk everything for honor and compassion. You didn't just save my father that day in the canyon. You saved me too, from a life of loneliness and settling for less than I deserved. We saved each other, Naiche. and now we get to spend the rest of our lives building something beautiful together. They kissed again as the last light faded from the sky. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had overcome prejudice and hatred with love and courage, and who would spend their days proving that understanding and compassion could build bridges across even the widest divides. The story of how an Apache warrior saved a rancher's life and won his daughter's heart would be told for generations in the Arizona territory, a reminder that love knows no boundaries, and that true honor transcends race, culture, and history.